Hi, everyone. My name is Ron Guth, and today I have a very, very special treat for you. This is the first part of an interview with John Dannreuther, a rather famous numismatist known to his friends and colleagues simply as JD. Now, I've known JD since the late 1970s, and he is one of the most respected dealers in the coin industry, not only for his incredible research and the books he has published, some of which are behind me here, but he is also a genuinely nice guy, and I consider him a longtime friend. He's very approachable. He loves to share his knowledge, and he is full of stories from his decades in the business. Now, this interview started out as a test of the Zoom technology just to see how it would work, but it actually turned into the first interview. So it's completely natural. There are no prompts, no prepared questions, just two old friends talking, me mostly listening, and JD sharing his stories. Now, in the past, JD and I have spoken and talked for hours, so you can bet that there will be later episodes with more great information. So please sit back and enjoy. Anyway, go ahead and tell me how you got started in coins.
I started as a stamp collector as a youngster, probably 6 years old. Then my father gave my brother and I silver dollars. I kept mine. My brother turned his back in and got the spending money, but I started collecting coins at age 6 or 7. And my father and I used to look through bags of cents and nickels on the weekend. But what really got us started was my mother knew a postmaster that was retired, but during the 30s and 40s, when people would come in and buy stamps, he'd pull out the Indian head cents. And we called him up and he had a shoebox full of Indian head cents under his bed. And we went and it was about 100 miles from where we were living. And we went over one weekend and bought them from him. So we bought the shoebox full of Indian head cents. It had every date except 77, 1908S, and 1909S. So as I was able to fill my Whitman folder, even though the 71 was a cull. But we started selling in the back of Numismatic News. This was the late 50s, so there was no coin world. We started selling 3 different dates for 35 cents. You had to send a self-addressed stamped envelope, which was 6 cents at the time or whatever. And I would tape the 3 Indian head cents onto an index card. Yeah, I used Scotch tape and put it in the envelope and send it on its way. Usually we got a dime and a quarter in the envelope, obviously silver because this is in the 1950s.
So you were how old then, roughly?
I was probably, I was 7 years old, maybe going on 8, this was in the late 50s. And then my mother worked in a bank. So we started looking through the bags of cents and nickels and finding 50D nickels. And at the time, of course, they started off, I was getting 75 cents, $1, $1.50. My father and I would split the profits each weekend. And, we would fill in whatever, if I found a coin that was better for my book, a buffalo, or occasionally we found V nickels, and occasionally you'd find an Indian cent. They were usually very well worn, but my mother would call me up sometimes and say, "Hey, come down to the bank. 2 thin rolls of dimes just got turned in," and there would be barber dimes in there. But they're mainly AGs, and very seldom would you find a date that was anything more than a common date.
Yeah, I think we followed similar paths. I mean, my start came in the early 60s, probably mid 60s. And I remember going to banks with my good friend Mark Earl, and we would go there every Saturday and just turn in a couple dollars and go through nickels and dimes and pull out all kinds of stuff. And not today, not anymore.
No, not anymore. But in the 50s, there was a lot. It started disappearing in the early 60s. And of course, the silver dollars got released in the early 60s, 61, 62. That's the 030 was my father was missing that until 1962 or 63 when they showed up at, they first showed up at the Seattle's World's Fair in 1962.
Really?
Where they had $1 million display of silver dollars under the Space Needle. And there was a big container with a plexiglass or some kind of clear viewing where you could see bags where they dumped most of the bags they left intact, just in the bags, but they poured out silver dollars. And one of the bags they poured out was 030s, and that got reported. I found it in my father's, one of his red books, the little clipping from Coin World, I believe it was, or Numismatic News, where they announced that, hey, there was a bag of 030s. So we ordered a bag after the World's Fair was over. It cost $1,050 for a sealed bag plus $15 railway freight. So we went down to the train station to pick it up. So we were in the coins at $1.06 and lost money because we got a bag of circulated Morgan dollars, and maybe the best coin was a 95.0 in VF at the time, was worth $3 or $4. But we turned in 980 coins or whatever we turned back into the bank. So we lost a little bit of money on it.
Yeah.
People find that hard to believe, but in 1966, when I went to college, I sold my collection to my father, but the common date silver dollars, I took down to the bank, over 300 of them, and put them in my checking account. In 1966, they were worth $1.05. Wasn't worth, traveling to sell them. And, the next year, $1.25, the next year, $1.50. And then of course they started going up. But a lot of people don't remember that in the early 1970s, you could buy BU silver dollars for $3, $4, $5. You could pick out, ADS dollars in gem for $3 and $4 and $5. It
those were the days.
Yeah, we none of us had the acumen to think about, well, someday, MS-68 Morgan dollars are going to be really good. If we, I picked 2 bags of dollars all the time, did not think that because they were so common that people would pay huge premiums, but for quality they do, just like in other coins. We knew type coins were rare, because we would see that, find a really superb barber dime or seated dime or seated half dollar. We knew how rare they were, but silver dollars were considered, oh, those are real common and high grade.
Yeah, yes. They're almost moderns, where who cares? So
they're common.
So we're I remember going to coin shops back then and buying coins for, holes that I couldn't get out of circulation, but I don't remember anybody really being super, super picky about quality and saying, okay, well, instead of $4, I'm going to pay $5 to get a really nice one. What was your experience with collectors or dealers that you dealt with back then? Who was picky?
I think it was the mid 70s when the guys like Gene Edwards and Cam Awash and some of the guys that really started buying the high quality coins. There were always people that did that. There was a guy in Oklahoma. What was his name? Can't think of his name, but Jimmy Hayes bought a lot of coins from him. And he always, Hank Rogers always had nice coins. And, there were certain dealers that probably were way ahead of their times. I mean, the Claps, the father and son Claps bought coins directly from the mints back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and evidently picked the coins. Maybe he had them send them several coins, and they picked the nicest ones, because when those sold in Eliasberg bought the Clap collection in 42, but when they sold in the Eliasberg collection, those are some of the finest coins in existence from the late 1800s, early 1900s. We all have seen the O2S 510s and 20 that graded 67, 68, and 69. They're just some amazing coins. But when you just like we could have done, we could have gone to the bank and picked out common date Franklin halves, which my bank, my mother called us up one day and said, hey, a bank in another city is sending us a partial bag of 1955 half dollars. And that was probably in 1957 or 58. They weren't really worth much of a premium. They were probably worth $10, $50, or $11 a roll. And my father took 10 rolls. The bank president took 20 rolls. Head cashier took 10 rolls. The rest of them went into circulation. We couldn't even, there was, $10, putting away $100 worth of 1955 half dollars sound like a great deal, but $100 was a lot of money in 1957 and 58.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now, so you worked with your dad until when, and then when did you actually get involved as a professional coin dealer?
Well, after college, I played music, and then my father in 1973, probably, and I don't remember the exact date, but early 1973, he called me up and said he couldn't see the coins anymore. He had macular degeneration, and they took away his driver's license. So he and my mother drove up to Memphis, where I was living at the time, and gave me a bunch of coins. And that weekend, I went out and sold $9,000 worth. He gave me a good cut out of it, 10%. I met Harrison Phillips that weekend, and we became friends. And so I started traveling to coin shows. I did the St. Louis show, the local Memphis shows, and we would take trips to Oklahoma, down to Texas, New Orleans. We stopped at the Greenville, Mississippi show, which interestingly was my first coin show in 1958 when I was 10 years old. I got to see a 13 Liberty nickel. J.V. McDermott mailed it to my father's eye doctor, Dr. D.C. Montgomery. Dr. Montgomery's collection was sold by Bowers and Ruddy in 1976. So Harrison and I would make the show circuit or the dealer circuit, and then stop off at a coin show. My first major coin show that I really remember was either Long Beach, but I do know that I went to the 1974 Central State show in the Mulebach Hotel in Kansas City, because Harrison and I drove in his Carmen Ghia from Memphis to Kansas City, and we took turns driving. And I was driving from St. Louis to Kansas City on I-70, and there was a rainstorm that came that you couldn't see the front of the car. So I pulled over, and Harrison was asleep, and he's going, "What's going on?" I said, "I can't see anymore." So we stopped for a while, and until the rain let up. But the Mulebach Hotel, Central States in 1974 was my very first that I remember. I might have gone to Long Beach in that February of 74, or even in late 73. But I know I started going to Long Beach in 74. And I've attended every Long Beach since that time. I've never missed a Long Beach show from 1974 forward.
Wow,
and nor have I missed a Central States or an A&A since 1975 for A&A, 74 for Central States. Even the ones
in long A&A badge things.
Yeah, I didn't do like Jeff did, and Jeff Garrett has. I have a lot of those badges, but I don't have all of them. I guess I could go back and buy them, but I never wore mine.
That's still quite the record. So what was your impression of the first major show that you went to?
I remember the Mulebach Hotel. I met a lot of dealers, Joe Flynn Jr., Fred Sweeney, Lynn Knight. I met a lot of impressive dealers that I had heard about. And at that point in time, there was still Abner Kreisberg and Jerry Cohen, Abe Kossoff, I believe, was there. I know when I started going to the NASC show, the Southern Cal show in the Ambassador Hotel, there was a who's who. There was Kreisberg and Cohen. There was Abe Kossoff. There was even the 92-year-old guy from Salt Lake City. I can't think of his name right now. Names start to fade. But it was amazing to go to these shows and see these people that I'd read about. And, it was, most of them were very nice, and you can strike up conversations with them. And I was able to make friends with quite a few of them, and buy coins from them. Lester Merkin was at a lot of these shows. And I started going to those New York shows at 56 and 7th in the basement down there. Those are some wonderful shows. Joel Cohen, all the people that the New York dealers and the East Coast dealers that I met, Ed Hips, Vince Philby, all of those guys were great to us young guys at the time. We were young at the time, a long time ago.
Oh yeah, well they were youngish too. I mean, everybody complains about the aging of numismatics and stamps and that sort of thing, but and it's kind of true. If you go to a coin show, it kind of looks old, but there's a lot of young guys.
It's changed. It's really changed in the last few years. There's more young kids and young ladies in the business than there's ever been. I would say it's switched from 80-20 to more like 60-40. There's lots of young entrepreneurs that are making good progress in the coin business. They are all on Instagram and eBay and things like that, and dealing with each other.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of business being done on the internet that we don't see. When you go to a coin show, you just don't see that activity. So
right.
I'm very positive about the future of our business. And you've been involved. Isn't it Seth Chandler does the Witter University? You taught at one recently, or what's your?
Well, no, I gave a talk one afternoon. I didn't actually teach, although I did help in the classroom. I gave a talk on Thursday afternoon, and Friday I went into the classroom, one of the classrooms, and helped with grading.
So you're giving back.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
we all have to pay it forward. Yep. Yeah. No, they helped me when I was young, so I like to help the young kids today, because I know what it was like. It's intimidating sometimes when you walk on a bourse floor and there's the big dealers there that you're afraid to go up and approach. And I did it when I was younger, and some of them were a little cold, but most of them were very friendly, and were always helpful, with questions. And that's how you learn. You can't learn unless you go out there and buy and sell coins and ask questions. That's how we all did it.
Yeah, I remember one of the biggest guys that I met early on, who was just the nicest guy to me, was Julian Liedman.
Yeah, Julian. He was just, he's great. He's always free with his knowledge, and if you had a question, Julian was always there to answer it and help you along.
Yeah, he's still a nice guy today. So
yep.
So you were a road warrior for a number of years. When did you just take your first corporate job in numismatics?
In 1976, I moved to Boston and worked for New England Rare Coin Galleries for Jim's company, Jim Halpern's company. And then I moved to Florida and worked for Numismatic Investments of Florida. And in January of 1979, I reestablished my company and moved back to Memphis in December of 1979, and was there in Memphis till 2017, when I moved to California. I moved to California in 2017, and was in Fullerton, California, and now I'm in Los Angeles, or North Hollywood, or Valley Village. It's all the same thing. It's Los Angeles.
Yeah. So Memphis is where you're from originally?
No, I grew up, I was born in Canton, Mississippi, which is right north of Jackson, Mississippi. And when I was 4 years old, we moved to a town of 550 people in the Delta of Mississippi, Anguilla, a tiny town, small farming community mainly. Most of my friends' fathers were farmers. There were a few that owned stores, but most of them were farmers and lived in town, but had plantations or farmed. And I remember one of the guys started catfish farming, started raising catfish, and everybody was like, that'll never work. And of course, that did.
Yeah. So why Memphis?
Well, I ended up in Memphis. After college, the band I was in moved to New Orleans, actually. And after about 6 months, my bandmates all said, this is not the life we want. They all left, and I moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and joined another band. And while I was there, I actually worked a couple of jobs. I worked in a paint store as an assistant manager of a paint store for about 6 or 8 months. But while I was there, a friend of mine from college, Tom Leonardo, a drummer, called me up and said, "Hey, this girl singer and piano player need a guitar player. They've signed a recording contract with TMI Records, Trans Maximus Incorporated, which was owned by Steve Cropper and a couple of other guys." Steve Cropper is maybe a familiar name to musicians, but maybe not to everyone. He wrote the music for Sitting on the Dock of the Bay with Otis Redding, and was the guitar player in the Stax house band, Booker T and the MGs. He's in the Blues Brothers movies. He's a very famous guitar player, played on Sam and Dave, Eddie Floyd, lots of all the Stax records in the 1960s. And so we started recording. Cropper was our producer, and after 6 songs were recorded, they went out of business. We were just supposedly going to be distributed by RCA Records, and obviously when TMI went out of business, we lost our recording contract. At that point in time, it was early 1973. That's when my father called me. I tell people I'm an accidental coin dealer. If my father hadn't gotten macular degeneration, I'd still probably be a musician in Memphis or New Orleans or some other place. But once I started buying and selling coins, I still tried to play music and do coins at the same time. But I got married in 1975, and I had to make a decision. And coins were definitely more lucrative than the music business. I still have lots of musician friends back in Memphis. In fact, Tom Leonardo still plays music every week. He's a practicing musician. And,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I remember meeting Tom.
Yeah. He actually worked for me. Yeah. He worked for me for a couple of years. Yeah. At coin shows. But I'm an accidental coin dealer. If my father hadn't gotten macular degeneration, I don't think I would be a coin dealer. I would probably still be interested in coins and maybe be a collector, but I don't think I would have become a dealer if I hadn't started selling his coins.
Well, I'm glad you did become a coin dealer because, man, we owe you a big debt of gratitude for all your research, the books you've published. I mean, it's,
I never intended that either. That came about, sort of that's serendipity also, because if David Hall hadn't asked me to write the PCGS grading guide, I probably wouldn't have started. I'd written a few articles, but I didn't think I would write, full length books. But after doing the PCGS grading guide, I got inspired, and then I was asked to do the Harry Bass's book. So I ended up in early 2004, starting that project, which luckily he did all the research, or most of it. I was able to build on what he had done because he was a super collector and had 634 early 2.5, $5, and $10 gold pieces that he took extensive notes on. And I was able to use his notes and build on that, and wrote that. And then I decided, I was always interested in proof coins, and I decided I wanted books about proofs. And the only book that was out there was Walter Breen's book, which was, written before there was digital photography. And so the biggest drawback to his book, proof book, was lack of photographs. And so I did, the first book was the proof gold book, proof gold varieties. I'm about to publish the nickel book. It's finished. And I've already started working on silver proofs. I was working on those this morning before we had our little call here.
So those books, by the way, are phenomenal. Are they still in print, or?
Yeah, the gold's still available. Those are available. The nickel book will be published, I hope, this fall. Well, I guess it's going to be this winter, but it's finished. But I'm having experts look at different chapters. I had a shield nickel expert. In fact, we went over a lot of it at Long Beach. We sat behind my table in between sales and went over the things that he found. And then I just sent it off to a 3-cent nickel expert, and he's done a couple of pages so far. He's extensive knowledge about 3-cent nickels, probably the most knowledgeable person on 3-cent nickels. So once that's finished, I'm probably going to send it off and have it. That's going to be a print on demand. I'll make an advertisement or an announcement, probably in the East Silo, that it's available. I've had people sign up for it at shows. They say, "Well, is it available?" I went, "No, not quite available."
Yeah.
I'm still finessing the very end of it. There's always a few things to correct and to edit and find out, a few different things about certain coins. Like Dave Bowers once told me, a manuscript's never finished. It's just sent off to the publisher. So at some point I will be publishing it. I'm sure there'll be plenty of errors, just like my Proof Gold book. There's no way when you write something that extensive that the errors creep in. It's impossible to catch them all.
Yeah, but boy, what a wealth of knowledge. Well, we'll go offline and I'll get information from you to put in the comments below about how to order your books, and hopefully we'll help sell a few of those for you. Tell us a little bit about your experience in New England Rare Coins.
So I moved to New England, to Boston in 1976, April of 76, when I took a job with Jim Halpern's company at the time, New England Rare Coin Galleries. I was head of the wholesale department. We had a wonderful staff, Mark Emery, Russell Vaughn, Bruce Amspatcher. It was great. So I learned a lot because I got to handle coins that I probably wouldn't have handled for years because Jim was a major force in the coin business in the 1970s, and obviously he is today with Heritage. But I was able to work with Jim and the other people there and learn a lot and get to handle coins that I wouldn't have handled, like I said, that I wouldn't have handled probably too much later. So it was a great experience. I didn't like the weather. I'm not a cold weather fan, but
not if you're from the south, the deep South.
Yeah, from the deep South, and I live in California now with beautiful weather. But it was a great experience. I worked there for about 18 months and then moved to warm weather again, down to Miami.
So what motivated you to move to Southern Florida, or how were you poached by Marty Haber?
Yeah, that was interesting. That's a long story, but basically I got offered more money, and my wife and I really didn't like. I mean, I love the Boston area. Boston's a wonderful town.
Yeah,
and
the
area around. Yeah,
to visit.
Yeah, to visit in the summertime or the spring, or the fall. But I didn't like the cold weather, and I got offered a better job, and I moved to Florida and worked there from October of 1977 to January the 15th, 1979, a day that will live in infamy. I couldn't have picked a better time really to restart JDRC, John Dannreuther Rare Coins. I was, just thought that the market was ripe, and I was not satisfied with the position I was in. I mean, it certainly wasn't the money, but it didn't feel right. Sometimes you have a certain feeling about a situation. So
sure. Now, 1979, that was the beginning stages of the silver boom. So,
yep.
So you rode that wave.
I did. That was probably, other than the 89, 90 and the current boom in coins, that was the most exciting time. Of course, this was before certification, third-party grading. So it was all what we call the Wild West, because what you saw in a coin might not be what the next person saw. But I quickly realized that Gene Edwards, David Hall, Gordon Rubel, Bruce Amspatcher, a lot of these people saw coins like I did. John Albanese, Kevin Lipton, Mark Salzberg, all of these people were very good graders. Jeff Isaac, I mean, I could keep going on. There's just tons of guys that knew coins and graded. Everybody has their own little peculiarities of grading, but we saw eye to eye on a lot of coins, and that's that's when we started PCGS. That was Gordon, Rubel, David Hall, Bruce Amspetcher, and myself were the 4 original guys that got together and met in the early 1985 and decided to start a grading company. But we added other people, of course. But we just saw eye to eye. I mean, when I walked up to David and showed him coins in the raw days before certification, we very seldom, we would look at a coin and we'd both say, that's a gem, that's a 65. Now, we weren't splitting hairs and calling them 66s and 67s, although some people did. Some people probably started calling the numbers, the in-between numbers before we did. But I in my own catalogs, I often put pluses and minuses, 65 plus, which today generally would be a 66. Or I did use 67. I often use that. That was when I saw some of the Elisberg coins, I put even higher grades.
And you have that catalog that from the Elisberg sale?
I attended every major sale from 1977 onward. The Fairfield collection was the really first major sale. I'd attended some minor sales, but the 77 Fairfield collection was the first sale that I was working at NIOF at the time and bought a lot of the seeded dollars, 15 or 20 seeded dollars in mint, state, and proof. That's where I bought the 1875 trade dollar, the famous mint state 68 that's traded hands several times. It went through Bruce Moreland, was the last owner before the current owner is Deloy Hansen, who bought his trade dollar set. But that was just an amazing coin. I paid $7,250 when they were bid $1,000. And people said, wow, why would you pay so much? And you were asking about quality. There were people in, like I said, in the 70s that people started noticing quality. There was a guy named Bob Emmer. I'm sure you remember that name.
Yeah,
a lot of people don't remember that name, but he was one of the first guys that looked at Don Dugas. There's all those people from that era, Gene Edwards, that would buy superb coins. I bought the 1805 dime from Gene Edwards at the first Midwinter ANA. A lot of people remember that because it was held in Colorado Springs on an ice rink, and they laid down plywood on the ice rink. I wore a long coat every day, my big heavy coat, because that was my Boston coat that I
still had.
Still had, yeah. I didn't need it in Miami, but I needed it in Colorado Springs, and it was a wonderful show. But I think Gene had maybe had a poker debt the night before, and I tried to buy the coin many times. It's now in a Mint State 7 holder, and he sold it to me there. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that was at the Broadmoor, right? With the
Broadmoor on an ice rink where they put down plywood. It was still freezing in there. It was still probably 55 or 60 degrees.
Yeah, they've had coin shows in some odd places. Remember the Lanham show? It was in the
parking garage. And if it rained, they had to put buckets out because it would leak. The parking garage leaked. It was just a concrete parking garage. Yeah, that was a great show. That was one of my favorite shows of all time. That's now the Baltimore show. That was bought by Whitman, and now it's held in downtown Baltimore at the convention center.
Well, so you rode the silver boom craze, and then you were in Central States for the infamous market crash.
Lincoln, Nebraska. Yes, I was. 1980. On Wednesday, coins were hot. On Thursday, they were not. It turned on a dime. You can't have a market like that today because it's too broad, and eBay and auctions. It goes up and down, of course, but it's more of an undulating wave as opposed to dropping off a cliff like it did in 1980. It just was all of a sudden they declared one-way traffic on the COMEX in gold. You could only sell, and of course you scratch your head. You can only sell. Well, who was buying? Well, that was the bunker hunts, and the Arabs had gotten together and cornered the silver market, and they just changed the rules on them. Cost Bunker Hunt $1 billion in 1980, which is was
Dang.
$1 billion in 1980 is different than today. He was one of the few billionaires back then. And they changed the rules. They've changed it to liquidation only. So all of the houses like Merrill Lynch and Shearson had to cover, they couldn't make their margin calls. So they changed the rules and didn't bankrupt Bunker Hunt, but cost him a lot of money. Well, it's been great talking to you, Ron. Looks like our time is about up, but maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, there's a lot more to go. So, okay, well, thanks for your time, JD. Really appreciate your insights, and we'll talk again.
Okay, you take care.
All right, thanks, buddy. If you've made it this far, I think you'll agree that JD has some really great stories. And again, we're going to have more of these in the future. If you like videos like this, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, and definitely hit the notification bell, because that way YouTube will alert you anytime I post a new video. Now, in the meantime, thanks again for visiting, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you and goodbye.